There comes a moment in life when silence and patience are no longer virtues. They become traps. Many of us are taught to tolerate, to explain, to give chances endlessly, believing that if we just communicate better or love harder, the disrespect will stop. But here's the harsh truth. Disrespect does not end through negotiation. It ends through distance. Because every time you stay where your worth is overlooked, you silently teach others that their behavior is acceptable. And the longer you stay, the more it becomes a pattern, not just for them, but for you too. Disrespect often doesn't start as a storm. It begins with little drops, a dismissive comment, a subtle eye roll, a forgotten promise. We excuse it. We call it stress, mood swings, or just how they are. And with each excuse, the boundaries we should have enforced start to blur. The human mind adapts quickly. What once shocked you slowly becomes your normal. Until one day, you wake up and realize you've built a life in which disrespect is the background noise, and your peace is nowhere to be found. Distance is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the space in which your self-respect can breathe again. People who consistently disrespect you rarely change because of heartfelt talks or emotional pleas. They change only when they are forced to face the silence you leave behind. That silence is not empty. It is full of a message. I will no longer participate in my own disrespect. Think about the times you tried to explain your worth to someone who was determined not to see it. Did your words transform them? Or did it drain you while they continued as they pleased? Words without consequences are just background noise to a disrespectful person. Distance, on the other hand, is a consequence they cannot ignore. It removes the comfort of access. It interrupts their pattern. It forces them to feel the absence of what they took for granted. And here's something even more important. Distance is not always about punishing others. It's about healing yourself. When you create space, you step out of the chaos that keeps you reactive. You give yourself the opportunity to observe your own wounds, your own patterns of overgiving, over-explaining, or overstaying. Distance becomes a mirror, showing you why you tolerated what you did and what needs to change within you so that you never allow it again. Distance also reveals truth about others and about yourself. When you step back from someone who disrespects you, you give them a choice to either reflect and rise to the standard of mutual respect or to remain where they are, proving that their presence was never rooted in genuine care to begin with. And that truth can be uncomfortable, even painful, but it is far better than living in an illusion where you constantly fight for crumbs of decency. Many people fear creating distance because they confuse it with abandonment. They think, what if they hate me? What if they move on without me? What if I'm alone? But ask yourself this: what kind of connection is worth keeping if it survives only when you accept disrespect? That is not connection. It is dependency. And dependency is a cage, not a relationship. Consider how many times you've tried to fix someone else's behavior with your patience. How many times you've absorbed their sharp words or their indifference, hoping that your loyalty would eventually inspire them to change. But here's the paradox. The more you absorb, the less they value you. Because in their mind, your willingness to stay through disrespect signals that their actions have no real consequence. Distance is a language, one that doesn't need raised voices or long explanations. It says, I deserve better. It communicates self-respect louder than any argument ever could. And it teaches others, in the most undeniable way, that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. This does not mean you must always cut people off with coldness or anger. True distance is often quiet and graceful. It does not need revenge or loud announcements. It is simply the choice to no longer invest your time, your energy, or your presence where it is continuously mishandled. Some people call this selfish. In reality, it is self-respect. And when you practice this form of distance, something remarkable begins to happen. Your life starts to reorganize itself. The energy you once spent on explaining yourself, fixing others, or enduring what you shouldn't begins to return to you. You notice new people who respect your boundaries. You find moments of peace that were once drowned in tension. You rediscover your own voice, clearer, stronger, and no longer shaking with the fear of rejection. There will be times when distance feels heavy, almost unbearable, especially if the person is someone you love deeply. But think about the long-term weight of staying where you are not valued. That weight corrodes slowly, turning your spirit dim. Distance may ache for a while, but it allows healing. Staying in disrespect only deepens the wound. Distance is not a single act, it's a process. At first, it may start with reducing conversations, creating emotional space, or limiting how much of yourself you share. For some, it means no longer explaining every thought just to be heard. For others, it means physically stepping away from environments where disrespect has become the norm. This gradual shift teaches you one of the most powerful lessons in life. Respect is not something you beg for. It's something you align your presence with. There will be resistance. People who once relied on your tolerance may suddenly accuse you of being distant, cold, or not the same anymore. They might even try to pull you back into their cycle, not because they've changed, but because they miss the convenience of your availability. This is the moment where many people give up and return thinking, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should give them another chance. And so the pattern restarts. But here's a perspective shift. Distance is not about punishing them. It's about reprogramming you. It's about breaking the addiction to chaos, to over-explaining, to hoping for change where none is truly happening. It's about teaching your nervous system that peace is normal, not tension, not constant repair, not the emotional roller coaster of waiting for respect that never comes. When you create distance, you begin to observe patterns with clarity. You see how often disrespect hides behind charm, how apologies often carry no action, how "that's just how I am" is used as a shield to avoid accountability. And you start asking yourself the most important question: why did I stay so long? That question is not meant to blame you. It's meant to awaken you. Because until you know why you stayed, you might repeat the same dance with a different face in the future. This is where distance becomes a teacher. It teaches you about your own silence, where it served you, and where it betrayed you. It shows you how much energy you were spending managing someone else's moods instead of building your own life. And slowly, you begin to reclaim that energy. You stop overgiving. You start creating new boundaries, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. One of the most overlooked truths about disrespect is that it rarely exists in isolation. It grows in spaces where your boundaries are unclear or consistently ignored. Every time you allow a small act of disrespect to pass without addressing it, you silently send a signal. This is acceptable. It may not be your intention, but in human behavior, what you tolerate eventually becomes what you live with. Distance disrupts that cycle. Imagine a friend who always cancels plans at the last minute, leaving you feeling unimportant. Or a colleague who constantly interrupts you, taking credit for your ideas. Or a partner who dismisses your feelings, calling you too sensitive when you express them. In each of these cases, direct confrontation may sometimes help. But when the pattern continues, the most powerful statement you can make is your absence. When you stop over-explaining, stop chasing, stop showing up for someone who never shows up for you, the dynamic begins to shift. Some people will finally see the pattern for what it is. They may reflect and change, realizing that their behavior costs them something valuable. Others will simply replace you with the next person willing to tolerate it. And as painful as that may feel, it's actually a blessing, because it reveals who they really are, without the mask of promises or temporary adjustments. Psychologically, distance is not just about them. It's about resetting your internal standards. Many people struggle to create distance because deep down, they fear what will fill that space. Loneliness is a powerful deterrent. The human brain is wired to seek connection, even at the cost of its own dignity. But here's the paradox. Only when you create that uncomfortable gap do you finally open space for genuine respect to enter. You can't invite respect into a room already crowded with people who thrive on your silence. Think about the energy you've invested in trying to be enough for people who disrespect you. The late-night texts, the long explanations, the endless second chances. What did they bring you? Perhaps a few moments of temporary calm before the cycle began again. Distance is the opposite of that pattern. It is the decision to stop feeding what starves you. And in that silence, you start to hear your own needs more clearly. You remember what makes you feel alive. You realize that respect is not a gift others give you. It is a standard you uphold by the spaces you choose to occupy. To truly understand why distance is so powerful, you need to understand the psychology behind disrespect. Disrespect is often not just about you, it's about how the other person sees themselves. People who lack self-awareness or emotional maturity often project their frustrations outward. They minimize others because it temporarily makes them feel more significant. They ignore your boundaries because they were never taught to value their own. If you stay close to this kind of behavior, you unintentionally reinforce their distorted sense of power. They learn that they can release their insecurities on you without losing access to you. Over time, that dynamic shapes your own self-worth. You start to question whether you deserve better or whether this is simply normal. Distance breaks that loop. When you step back, you no longer feed their narrative. You no longer provide an audience for their outbursts or a cushion for their carelessness. And in that absence, something profound begins. They are left with themselves. For some, that triggers reflection. For others, it triggers anger. But for you, it begins the process of healing. This is why creating distance is not only an act of strength, but also an act of self-preservation. It allows you to restore your internal compass. Instead of constantly reacting to someone else's moods or criticisms, you begin to build a life where your self-worth is self-defined, not externally negotiated. Actionable steps to begin this process often start small. Reduce unnecessary access. Not everyone needs constant updates about your life. Delay your responses. You are not obligated to be instantly available, especially to those who misuse your presence. Speak less, observe more. Watch how people act when you no longer over-explain or over-apologize. Redirect your energy. Spend time with people who appreciate your effort or on pursuits that strengthen you. These small acts of distance may feel insignificant at first, but together they create a boundary, one that speaks louder than confrontation ever could. Over time, people will either meet you at that boundary with respect or drift away, and both outcomes serve your growth. Once you create distance, a new challenge begins: the emotional aftermath. Many people expect instant relief, but the truth is, distance often feels heavy before it feels liberating. You may find yourself replaying conversations, wondering if you were too harsh, or questioning whether you did the right thing. This is the mind's natural response to change, especially if you have been conditioned to equate closeness with safety, even when that closeness was toxic. Guilt is one of the most common reactions. You might feel guilty for pulling away, for saying no, or for prioritizing yourself. But ask yourself, who benefits from that guilt? Does it serve your growth, or does it serve the comfort of those who disrespected your presence? Guilt is often a byproduct of old programming, of being taught that your worth is tied to how much you endure. The reality is, choosing distance is not cruelty. It is an act of responsibility. You are responsible for protecting your peace, even if others misinterpret it. Expect backlash too. Some people will try to guilt trip you back into proximity. They may call you selfish, cold, or ungrateful. They might suddenly become more attentive, not because they've changed, but because they feel their control slipping. This is where your resolve matters most. Distance is not a test you pass in a day. It is a boundary you maintain despite the noise that tries to pull you back. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The fog clears. You start noticing how much energy you used to spend just surviving in environments that never nourished you. You find quiet moments where your mind isn't racing to fix someone else's chaos. And slowly, a new kind of clarity sets in. The kind that allows you to build relationships not out of fear of being alone, but out of mutual respect and genuine care. This transformation is gradual. Some days you'll feel empowered. Other days you'll feel the ache of loss. Both are part of the healing. Distance is not the absence of love. It is the presence of truth. And that truth sometimes hurts before it heals. As you continue this journey, remind yourself, you are not running away. You are returning to yourself. Distance is not the wall you build to keep everyone out. It's the door you open to let better connections in. There will come a moment when you start asking yourself, should I ever let them back in? This question arises not because you're weak, but because distance creates space for reflection on both sides. It's natural to wonder if change has happened, if lessons were learned, if respect has finally found its place where it was once missing. But here's the key. Reopening the door should never be based on longing or guilt. It should be based on evidence. Has the person taken real responsibility for their behavior? Have they shown consistent change over time? Not just words in moments of tension, but actions that match respect? And most importantly, do you feel safe in their presence, or do you feel you must shrink yourself to maintain peace? Rebuilding self-respect is rarely a grand event. It's a series of small choices made daily. It's saying no when your old self would have said yes, just to avoid conflict. It's pausing before explaining yourself to someone who has already shown they're not listening. It's choosing environments, friends, workspaces, relationships that reflect the respect you've begun to give yourself. Distance over time does something powerful. It resets your internal boundaries. The version of you who once tolerated disrespect starts to feel like a distant memory, because now you know how costly it was. You start valuing your time more. You stop chasing temporary validation. And you begin to attract people who recognize your silence not as weakness, but as strength. Resilience grows here, not from avoiding pain, but from surviving it and choosing better because of it. The more you honor the space you've created, the less you'll tolerate the behaviors that once drained you. You'll find that your conversations become clearer, your relationships more mutual, and your inner voice louder. There comes a point in your journey where distance no longer feels like a defense mechanism. It becomes a natural state of self-respect. This is when you know you've crossed a threshold. You no longer feel the constant pull to explain your absence or justify your choices. The need to be understood fades, replaced by the calm knowing that your peace does not depend on their approval. One of the clearest signs you've reclaimed your power is when disrespect no longer surprises you. It simply no longer hooks you. Where once a cutting remark would have sent you spiraling into overthinking or self-doubt, now it lands and dissolves because your worth is no longer up for negotiation. This is not numbness, it's clarity. You've built an inner space that others cannot easily shake. Distance also changes the way you give. Before, you may have given out of fear of losing someone, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as cold or distant. Now you give because you choose to, not because you're pressured to. Your kindness is no longer a survival tactic. It's an authentic expression that comes with healthy boundaries. And as this shift happens, you start to notice something extraordinary. The relationships that remain or newly form in your life are of a different quality. They carry mutual respect as their foundation. They do not drain, they nourish. They do not demand constant proof of your worth. They recognize it. This is what distance ultimately leads to, not a life of isolation, but a life where your connections are filtered by respect. The people who once thrived on your silence may still exist, but they no longer have access to your peace. The ones who truly value you will adapt to your boundaries or make space for your growth. At the end of this journey, the truth becomes clear. Distance is not a weapon, it's wisdom. It's not about creating walls to keep the world out. It's about creating space so your life is no longer crowded with noise that drowns your worth. Disrespect does not end because you demand respect. It ends because you stop participating in what diminishes you. The harsh truth is that not everyone will like this version of you. Some will call you cold, detached, or difficult. But those who genuinely value you will see the difference. You are no longer reacting, you are responding. You are no longer pleading, you are choosing. And that choice, over and over again, builds a life where your peace is not at the mercy of someone else's moods. To end disrespect, you don't always need a louder voice. You need stronger boundaries. You don't need endless explanations. You need decisive actions. And sometimes, the most powerful action you can take is to step back, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. So, if you're standing at that crossroads now, if you've tried the conversations, the compromises, the second and third chances, and nothing has changed, remember this: distance is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of one where your dignity is no longer negotiable. Start small. Create the space you need. Let the silence do its work.